everyone, my name is Sinovuyo Damane, and if you're new here, thank you so much for popping in. I hope you find this video particularly useful, and if of course you're a returning subscriber, thank you for just sticking with me through thick and thin, commenting, liking, sharing, and all the love that you continue to show me. I truly appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. Now, as I previously mentioned in the last video, today I will be speaking about the Allan Gray Orbis Foundation, and I decided that the best way to approach it, and probably the most useful and beneficial way for applicants or prospective applicants, is to speak about the application process in specific, right? I've been a candidate fellow of the Allan Gray Orbis Foundation since 2020, and I would not be doing this video recommending it to you if it wasn't one of the most amazing experiences and opportunities that I've ever had to date, right? So essentially what the Allan Gray Orbis Foundation is all about is developing the next generation of high impact, responsible entrepreneurs, leaders, change agents who are just passionate about affecting societal change, right? They provide support to people who are part of the Allan Gray Orbis Foundation at the point where you've been accepted into the foundation in two main ways, right? They, one, provide for funding, which is them covering all things university funding, and particularly the essentials of ensuring that you get through universities without having to worry about finances, which includes your tuition fees, accommodation, you have a monthly stipend that you receive, they cover your books and learning materials, what else? Therapy, they pay for therapy if you need therapy, private tutoring, they also pay for that as well. Basically the essentials of ensuring that your university journey is smooth insofar as finances are concerned. Then the second part of how they offer their assistance, which is in conjunction with the funding, is the entrepreneurial development program, which gives you access to mentorship, to talks, to business mentorship as well. And the fundamental part of that is the assignments, which are known as ignitions in the foundation, which are entrepreneurial based. So they focused on entrepreneurial development, problem solving, personal and professional development as well. So those assignments that you submit regularly to the foundation as part of their entrepreneurial development curriculum. Right. So that's essentially who they are and what they do. More information is on their website, and I'll leave the link on or in the description box. Now, particularly when we focus on the application, right? As I have already mentioned, it's for grade 12 learners. There are certain academic requirements that you need to meet. You must have to be able to qualify to even apply for the opportunity. Academic requirements are based on your grade 11 final results. So as much as you're in grade 12, what they're looking at is your grade 11 final results. If you're doing mathematics, you need to have had a 60% minimum. If you're doing mathematical literacy, you need to have had at least 80% minimum for mathematical literacy in your grade 11 final results. And your overall average for your grade 11 final results needs to be a minimum of 70%, excluding life orientation. You need to be a South African citizen. Even if you are from outside of South Africa, you need to have citizenship in South Africa. They fund pretty much all of the study programs except for medicine, dentistry, and veterinary science. And yes, you need to intend to study at one of the partner universities. It's 10 universities which are listed on their website. You can follow the link for that, but it includes WITS, UJ, UP, UCT, UWC, Stellenbosch, UKZN, University of the Free State, Rhodes, and Nelson Mandela University. So if you plan on studying at any one of those universities, they will fund your studies if you are successful throughout the application process. The application process consists in three parts, which is one, the actual application, which you either do online or you download the application form and post it to their offices, or physically go hand it in at their Cape Town or Johannesburg offices, right? So they have that application process, and if after they look at your application you are successful for the second stage, not successful in that you're being selected for the foundation, but it means if they're happy with the initial application, you'll be shortlisted for an interview. So they'll invite you for an interview at their offices to just obviously get to know more about you, test your capabilities, your passions, etc. And then if the interview goes well, there's this third stage, which is the selection camp. So they invite you to a selection camp with other people who have applied for the foundation, where you are given tasks such as having to pitch ideas like public speaking, but pitching a business idea, pitching solutions, working in groups, etc. And then only after the selection camp do they give you the final verdict in terms of whether your application, your entire application, has been successful and you're now going to be a candidate fellow of the Allan Gray Orbis Foundation or not. That's only done after the third stage, which is the selection process. Now, I would like to give you, which is really the gist of this video, to give you pointers on how to approach the application process. The first part of the application is obviously the typical personal information like your name, parents, schooling history, academic history, listing extracurricular activities, just listing, not really speaking about them, just listing your involvement in cultural activities, sports activities, leadership, etc. That's the first part. However, I've found that the most daunting, even in my experience, the most daunting part for me of the application was having to answer the questions that they have as part of the application form, right? So they have 10 questions which are broadly there to assess, one, your ambitions and your plans, two, how you deal with challenging situations, and three, leadership and entrepreneurial experience and interest, really, right? The questions on like your ambitions and your plans, strengths and weaknesses are quite straightforward, right? This is where you speak. The one question on like your ambitions, they want you to speak about, which is 7.1 of the application, right? They want you to speak about what you want for yourself and your ambitions for yourself, and how these ambitions, or how you're planning to use your personal ambitions for the benefit of society and to create the South Africa that you would like to see within the next 10 years, right? Then there they ask you to specifically state what you plan to do and how you plan to go about doing it, right? So for example, any initiatives you'd like to start to create the South Africa that you want in line with your future ambitions, and how you plan on carrying them out, right? And then they speak about your strengths and development areas, which is a fancy word of really just saying like your weaknesses, the areas that you need to improve or work on, and also how those have shaped why you decided to study, why you're studying, right? So there needs to be like a logical explanation. You can't say you're bad at mathematics but you wanted to study accounting, unless there's some philosophical or deeper explanation to it. For example, wanting to challenge yourself in an area that you're not so good at. But that usually isn't the case. Usually people will stick to their strengths to inform what they study, so that's what they want you to answer, and I think that's 7.3 of the application. And then they ask you about obviously how you've handled tough situations, trying to see whether you're a resilient person who's able to overcome challenges. So they'll ask questions, I think 7.9, 7.10 of the questions on the application form. They'll ask how you've dealt with a challenging and stressful situation that you've faced previously. They ask about a time in your life where you had immense or heavy responsibilities and workload, and how you dealt with that. So you can use, in that specific question, you can use an example such as like grade 11, where there was heavy workload, and tell them how you dealt with that heavy workload. How did you perhaps allocate your time to still ensure that you deal with the heavy workload, etc. So those I think are pretty straightforward. If anyone has any more questions on those, please leave them in the description box so I can try my best to guide you in terms of how to approach those questions. And then the bulk of the questions relate to like your leadership and experience, and I mean entrepreneurship, right? So they relate to leadership and entrepreneurship experience, interest, trying to gauge whether you are someone who has shown actual interest and experience in these areas, right? And I mean, they have about quite a lot of questions that ask about this, right? It's 7.2, 7.4, 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, where they essentially ask things like, have you ever started a business? Have you ever been part of an initiative or a project, even if you didn't personally start it, but it's a project that you played a key role in. They ask things such as giving an example where you had to get people to commit to a particular goal, where you demonstrated leadership in your family, school, or community, when you were given a project to implement at school or in your community, where you identified a problem and turned it into an opportunity. Now, for the sake of time, I won't go into these individually, but I want to give a very key point when it comes to this, to these questions under leadership and entrepreneurship, right? Here, they're not necessarily looking for, it's not the magnitude of what you've done or been involved in that matters, but rather the principles that you gained, what you learned during that time, regardless of how seemingly small the task itself was. But what matters is like, what lessons did you learn there? How did you apply yourself as a leader? How did you grow from that experience? That's essentially what they're looking for. So don't feel pressured to come up with these grand ideas, often risking even lying or being dishonest, because you're trying to paint yourself as this perfect candidate who is the greatest leader, who's the greatest entrepreneur of all times. The Allan Gray Orbis Foundation at this point of the application is not looking for finished products. What they're looking for is signs and symptoms, right? That this person has potential. They have in their everyday life, in different roles, regardless of how seemingly small or big the role may have been, shown that they have leadership potential. And essentially, because again, the role or the mandate, vision of the Allan Gray Orbis Foundation is to develop the next generation of high impact, responsible entrepreneurs, leaders, change agents. Their role is to develop you to become that, right? So at this point, they don't want you to prove that you are that already, but that their efforts through their program will actually yield results, because this is someone who has previously shown that they're interested in this, they have this type of potential, etc., right? So that's how you should approach these questions. To leverage the small things and explain them in such a way that the person who's reading your application sees the value of that thing that was seemingly small, right? So expand on it, explain, reflect. This person who's reading must see that, you know what, in as much as, for example, leading the class in picking up papers outside because you saw that, you know what, the school is not looking tidy, and you suggested to your classmates that you should clean up the premises. Yes, in that situation, for example, you weren't necessarily the head girl or the head boy or a prefect, but you demonstrated initiative, you demonstrated leadership, right? In your eyes, it may seem small because that's what people tend to do. You tend to minimize the impact of the things that you've done, particularly when there was no title involved. Don't do this here, expand on, leverage on the small things, explain them in such a way as to show the person who's reading the value and the lessons and the principles that you've learned and developed in those seemingly small tasks. 2, I've already mentioned being honest. Be honest, because if you're successful based on lies that you've told, quite frankly, on the application form, you're going to get to the interview and they're going to ask you to expand more on the things that you said you've done or been a part of. What are you going to say then when those questions are presented? Also, man, how you get there is just as important as getting there, right? So it's very important that you carry this entire process with integrity. Be honest, be authentic as well. Be honest and authentic. And really, I think those are really the biggest and what I think are the most useful ways to approach, or tips in approaching the application process. So after that, When you're successful based on the application, it's the interview. Then if you're successful for that, as I've already mentioned, it's the selection camp. And after that, you're notified whether you are officially form part of the Allan Gray Orbis Foundation or not. And if you are not successful, I still encourage that you apply for other funding opportunities like NSFAS, Tutuka for prospective accounting students, Jake's Gerwel Fellowship, and Funza Lushaka for prospective teachers, so students who want to study teaching, Funza Lushaka and Jake's Gerwel Fellowship. And there are so many other bursaries as well, the Mutsipe Foundation as well. I'll also leave the link to the ZA bursaries in the description box below for you to see a long list of other bursaries that are also funding opportunities that are available for you. And even if you qualify to apply for the Allan Gray Orbis Foundation, apply for it and other funding opportunities as well. Please, please, please. But other than that, man, I think this Allan Gray Orbis Foundation was particularly like an amazing experience for me, not because of the funding, which is always a great thing. I mean, who wouldn't want to be funded for their studies, right? But the entrepreneurial development part for me was really, you know, that was the star of the entire experience. That is the star of the entire experience. And I really hope that for people who are really interested in just developing themselves personally, professionally, as entrepreneurs, as leaders, that you really get to be a part of this experience and this foundation. Without dragging this video even further, if you have any other questions, because as I mentioned, the deadline is on the 28th of April at 5, please leave the questions in the comment section and I will definitely respond to them ASAP to just give you better guidance on how to approach the questions and the application process. With that being said, until the next time that we see each other, I hope you take care and all the best.